Hi, thanks for joining me. This is a video that I'm making for my policy class and really anyone who is interested in these themes of social work values, advocating, lobbying, environmental toxins, informed consent. And so if you're interested in those things, this will be a video that hopefully you will like. We again had this incredible honor of having Ivana Stark come and talk with my class here this past week. And so this video is focused on looking at her work as a local advocate, working with key stakeholders, with essentially this goal to make Minnesotans safer. And Ivana is the state director of Clean Water Action Minnesota. And it was really a pretty powerful experience to have her come in and talk about her work, specifically Amara's Law, which, if you are not aware of Amara's Law, that passed last legislative session here in Minnesota. It's the most comprehensive nationally, even globally, on PFAs. PFAS or PFAs, it's people interchangeably use those two terms to describe PFAS. But so Ivana came to class and talked to our class for almost 3 hours after having a full day lobbying at the Capitol, advocating at the Capitol. So that was really appreciated. And I met Ivana, let's see, I think like 2 years ago when I was working doing some volunteer community organizing for a wetland conservation cause that I was really passionate about. And, Ivana just really immediately struck me with her intelligence, her passion, her moral compass, her ability to really forge these relationships and coalitions with key stakeholders to advance a policy that she was uh, recommending. And there's many things that are involved in her plate in terms of policy, but Amara's Law was really uh, a big focus that they had during last legislative session. So again, very powerful to listen to Amara's story for our class and start analyzing, not only Amara's Law, but other social policy laws, policies that, have been enacted that we can really start analyzing from multiple angles, which is really important in policy work. So this first clip I have is a clip of Ivana. It's from her TikTok page. And if it's, I don't really know TikTok lingo. I'm not on TikTok, but I think like I don't know if this is the right terminology, but her account is called That One Minnesota Girl, Minnesota MN. And then her name is ACESAREWILD. So that's how you can look her up on TikTok. And it's the reel that she created the day that she came to talk to our class. So it just kind of gives you a snapshot of what her day was like and what her day was like the day that she came to talk to us.
Hit the ground running for a 9 a.m. meeting this morning. Got a call, my kid threw up, had to handle that. Made my way to the Capitol for the taxes committee where data centers were being discussed. We testified against it because it pollutes water and we don't think billionaires should get more corporate handouts. Beautiful Capitol building on a lovely Minnesota day. Here's the agenda where you can see that I testified. Just a stunning space in the Capitol with our beautiful state seal. This was right after the committee. We're not allowed to take video during the committee. So here's a little snapshot of me testifying with regards to our feelings around justice, economic justice, social justice, and environmental justice related to data centers. Then we went on to another hearing for a bill called Keep It Clean. And that bill addresses pollution left behind by ice fishermen. Really great day. That bill moved on to the next step, which is super exciting. Every time you go into a committee, there's a stack of paperwork, agenda, written testimony, that sort of thing. So you got to make sure you grab that so you're prepared. It was around 50 degrees, I think, today, so nobody really wore coats. There was a lot of bare skin, really excited to see that. That means spring is coming. I also love the Minnesota Senate building. It feels very Mad Men to me, very sleek and sexy, so I had to get a good shot of that. Then I finished the day off at Bethel University for a 3-hour conversation around how we passed Amara's Law to a bunch of amazing social work students. Look how cute they are. Just absolutely loved them.
For the record.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I'm Ivana Stark, State Director of Clean Water
And would you bring
Action.
the microphone closer to your mouth? Thank you, appreciate it.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, I'm Ivana Stark, State Director of Clean Water Action Minnesota. Our mission is to protect the land we live on, the air we breathe, and the water we drink. I'm here representing tens of thousands of our Minnesota members, and we urge rejection of Senate File 769. Why is an environmental group here to talk about taxes? Because giving tax exemptions to billionaires on the backs of the most vulnerable speaks to our core value of justice. We aren't seeking to tax success, but we do believe in fighting against greed and ensuring that those with the most pay their fair share. Our interest in data centers stems from the consumption of huge quantities of water and their use of an array of chemicals to aid in refrigerating and building maintenance. Across Minnesota, thousands of residents are exposed to toxic chemicals and unclean water through no fault of their own. By appropriately taxing billionaires, we can invest in meaningful cleanup and protect our natural resources and water. Data centers cost Minnesotans money as our water resources are depleted and cleanup costs are applied. Giving billionaires more tax breaks when average Minnesotans are struggling to buy basic necessities isn't the answer. These companies can afford to pay their fair share. Google has $30 billion in profits. Meta has $62 billion. Microsoft has $80 billion. We can have facilities that offer jobs and that pay their fair share in taxes. On August 4th, 2024, ProPublica published an article called "How a Washington Tax Break for Data Centers Snowballed into One of the State's Largest Corporate Giveaways." It's kind of a mouthful of a title. This article explains that once tax breaks were given in Washington state, the goalposts kept moving. It's an important warning for us. First, job promises were made. Washington lawmakers approved a tax break for data centers to create more jobs, but they can't actually say how many jobs the state got. Second, the tax break snowballed. Repeated expansions turned the tax breaks into one of the biggest corporate tax giveaways in the state. And third, unintended consequences occurred. The tax break rewarded growth of an industry whose massive demand for electricity could threaten clean energy efforts in Washington. We have seen this play out in state after state across the country, and we know how this story ends. We have an opportunity to do better by putting hard-working, tax-paying Minnesotan residents before big billionaire corporate interests. Our natural resources can't afford the strain of billions of gallons of water to keep data centers running, and our neighbors can't afford to write the check. Again, on behalf of thousands of Minnesota members, we ask you to prioritize the financial health of Minnesota families over billionaires and global corporations. We are here and our door is open to have future conversations about how we can move forward in a way that would not allow for free corporate giveaways. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I invite Catherine Hoffman and Patty O'Keefe.
So this next video from Ivana's TikTok page shows another snapshot into what her life is like as the state director for Clean Water Action Minnesota. You can see that she is constantly involved in policy during the course of her day. It's often extremely fast-paced environments, discussions where policy creation is happening. And it's really incredible to see her work in this capacity.
We started today with a press conference talking about why data centers should not get tax breaks and need to follow regulatory permitting processes in the Minnesota State Capitol today. And then we went on to a couple of committees. We had the House Taxes Committee and then the House Environment Committee. It was actually really kind of fun. We had this really fun back and forth banter in House Taxes. A former legislator used to be our Minnesota State Director, and so we had some time to reminisce about that while we talked about how billionaires shouldn't get tax cuts. Then, of course, our lovely coalition partners and I joking around, going from meeting to meeting, cracking jokes about how we should go over there and visit Governor Walz with his Secret Service. Love this picture. All the governors in Minnesota have their picture up in the Capitol. And then we finished off in Senate Environment, going over the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency budget recommendations. Ran into a friend, Connie Bernardi, former legislator, dear friend of mine. And no day is complete until you give your child and your husband something heavy and sharp to crack open. Huntley was really disappointed that there were no candy pieces and no chocolate in the middle of this nut that he found on the floor, but spent some time learning about nature.
So in this next clip, Ivana is giving an update on some new bills that were recently introduced that aim to change the regulations of PFAS. Ivana gives this update and kind of how this came to be and what's going on, and then next steps for moving forward.
I'm wrapping up for the night. It's almost 8 o'clock, and I got a hearing notice that Representative Josh Heinzman, who's from northern Minnesota, he's a GOPer, has 2 bills that will be heard in the Minnesota House of Representatives on Tuesday, March 4th at 1 o'clock in the Environment Committee. It is in G3 in the Minnesota State Capitol on Tuesday. The 2 bills are House File 81 and House File 1627. Both of them are seeking to essentially gut, attack, whatever word you want to use, Amara's Law. Amara's Law is the most comprehensive ban on toxic PFAS chemicals in the country, honestly, in the world. PFAS are a man-made chemical that were made here in Minnesota by 3M. They're all over the news. There was a huge plume in the East Metro. People have been getting sick for years. They've been dying from things like cancer. People are struggling with autoimmune issues. Passes down to baby through cord blood, breast milk, all sorts of things. It's terrible stuff. This is a pretty egregious attack on a bill that is being copy and pasted around the country. We've had Japan, Australia, London, all come to town and want to learn about the bill. The Washington Post has told the story. It's really, Google Amara Strandy, Amarastrande, a really wonderful woman who spent the last few months of her life advocating for the pass of Amara's Law. It passed with bipartisan support. The law bans PFAS from an array of consumer products. I'm so tired. And also requires information disclosure. So if products are being sold in Minnesota that have PFAS, they have to disclose it to the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency so that consumers can go to a public website and search products and know what they're buying. There's also some components related to firefighting foam. But the point is that, again, just like data centers, big corporations worth billions are coming into Minnesota and trying to poison us and hurt us and harm us and profit off of our suffering. And Representative Josh Heinzman is falling into their hands and doing their bidding, and I am furious over it. We worked hard. We worked with stakeholders. We worked with businesses. We worked with the fire marshal. We worked with other legislators. The woman who is now the executive director of the GOP in the state of Minnesota was our contract lobbyist and helped us pass this, so do not tell me that this is some crazy liberal agenda. The family will be there on Tuesday. Friends of Amara's will be there on Tuesday. The advocates who have been working on this will be there on Tuesday. We ask that you show up. Go to Clean Water Action, and there's a section where you can sign up and help, and you enter your name and your email, and then it emails your elected representatives. Call your senators, call your House members, let them know that this is not okay. You're not going to stand for it. Let Governor Walz know that you want him to protect Amara's Law and that we're not going to tolerate any of these attacks. PFAS is linked to cancer, autoimmune issues, low birth weight in babies, learning disabilities, liver function issues, all sorts of stuff. They knew this stuff was toxic in the 1950s. They developed it and sold it to us anyway. Women on the Teflon line were having babies with birth defects, and instead of saying, ooh, maybe Teflon is dangerous and we shouldn't sell PFAS to people, they took women off the Teflon line and put men on it. Go watch Dark Waters and then tell me that this shit's okay. And while you're at it, let Josh Heinzman know that we are not going to let him gut Amara's Law.
So in this next clip, Ivana gives an example of why PFA's legislation passed last session, why it was supported in such a nonpartisan fashion. So this example, she talks about how firefighters are at a greater risk of adverse health outcomes because of their exposure to PFAs. The foam that they're using to fight fires has PFAs. Their uh, safety equipment even contains PFAs. They have special ways that they, try to remove that when they get into the fire station. So in this clip, she's really talking about that as one of many, many, many examples of why we need to, you know, innovate some better technology to replace PFAs being.
One of the reasons that firefighters have such high rates of illnesses like cancer, and it's absolutely devastating. We just had a film crew from Japan come and visit us to have a conversation about the work that they're doing, and they actually showed their first documentary and then they filmed for their second documentary. And the issue that they're having in Japan with PFAS is directly related to American military bases and fire foam dispersals. So when you look at airport areas like Bemidji, Minnesota, drilled a new well, it was like $20 million because of foam that had been discharged repeatedly, at their airport. It's a very real problem. And if houses around these airports have private wells, it's even worse because there's nobody at the state that monitors private wells. That's up to the homeowner. So you have to get your well tested, and then if it's contaminated, you have to drill a new one, and it's a super huge mess. So military personnel, firefighters, all sorts of first responders, and it's not only just in the foam. PFAS is also in their turnout gear and the what they wear when they go into burning buildings. So it's all around bad stuff. The good news is that there is a move globally to move away from this stuff. De Gaulle Airport, Australia, London, all sorts of places are moving away from PFAS foam. So we just need to get our FAA moving on it a little bit quicker. Oil refineries are really fighting this change because it is an expensive changeover. The difference between PFAS-free fire foam and fire foam with PFAS is negligible. It's just like a crazy fraction of a second. So something to really be aware of, and a conversation that you should be having with your federal delegate.
So in our policy class, we've talked a lot about analyzing and frankly understanding a policy comes from looking at all sides of the issue, right? You can't really argue for a policy position unless you understand why people, why key stakeholders may have other viewpoints, and you need to understand those other viewpoints. So in Amara's law, this PFA's regulation would impact Minnesota businesses, in a financial way, as well as national companies who desire to sell their products in our state. If those products contain PFAs, there will be some financial implications to be aware of. There are businesses here in our state that have inventory that they're not able to sell because this law went into effect January 1st of this year. And so it's a pretty new thing here that is just starting to be enforced. So she talks about one of these business examples, Ivana, and I totally get it from their perspective. There was a lot of outreach to the business community about Amara's law locally. I understand from a business perspective that this will, constitute a financial loss. And I understand that. And I know that businesses don't like that, right? It's unfortunate. Um, and for a furniture company to have furniture sitting around in their stores and their shops that they aren't legally able to sell anymore, I get it. I get that there's frustration. I get that there's anger about that. Um, and in Amara's law, there were some exceptions and different timelines for certain industries included, but those were primarily for safety and health reasons, right? So in this next clip, she's talking about a local furniture store and their frustrations with the passing of Amara's law.
So I can't speak to what Home does or doesn't have in their inventory, but this is a really good example. I know the Home CEO did reach out to legislators, and those emails were passed on to me. I reached out and asked him to have a conversation, and there was no response. But this is kind of a perfect example of why consumers need to be aware. You can go to a furniture store and buy outdoor furniture, and nobody will tell you that it's coated in potentially really dangerous toxic chemicals. So, I mean, this is really about consumer awareness and making sure that people understand what they're being exposed to. So you buy a super cute outdoor patio set, you grill some burgers, you sit your kiddos on it. They're touching things, they're eating, they're not washing their hands. Anything that is on that furniture gets into you and your children. So, this again isn't about trying to harm business. We want to work with businesses, we want to work with business owners. We've been trying to be partners since day one. They have not been willing to meet us in the middle. At the end of the day, we just want consumers to be informed and to be safe. And if there is an indication or a notice on these things that they're dangerous and you want to buy them, that's on you, but you have the right to know. So what Home does or doesn't have, I can't speak to, because we've opened our door to them and they don't want to play nice.